After watching Mulholland Drive for the second time in its entirety, I picked up on a few things that I did not recognize the first time that I viewed the film many years ago. Although I think some of the magic was absent this time around because I began to understand more. Of course, you always want to rekindle the flame, and you always want to rediscover that magic that you have the first time that you view a movie. As with anything in life, that you can only really experience for the first time once. However, more and more, Mulholland Drive is looking like one of the best films ever made, and probably the best film of the 21st century. I know a lot of people would agree. I think the only other film to rival is There Will Be Blood by Paul Thomas Anderson, probably the world's best active director. But before I go further with the review, it should be very relevant to say that the biggest mistake that anyone can make watching a movie is trying to understand it the first time. You may not always have a great viewing experience the first time, but I think that the reason that some people hate Mulholland Drive and have misgivings is they have the wrong mindset when they go into watching it. They think they can figure it all out, or that they should, which is not necessarily the point. In the words of Roger Ebert, there may not even be a mystery, and I think that is the key to solving the so-called mystery. This film is a lot more about emotion than plot, and although everyone wants to understand a great plot, you should recognize that plot and story are two different things. And if you really want the story to be impactful, you need to just watch it and let it sink in. Never try to have foregone conclusions while watching the film, which could be entirely wrong. Now, for the same reason, I do not want to so-called analyze this film, but there are some very important scenes, and I want to talk about them. First thing I noticed watching this again was the spectacular opening sequence, which is one of the best of all time. David Lynch, for precedent, has, I think, 3 masterpieces. Blue Velvet, his first film, Eraserhead, and this film, which I believe is the top of the heap. Blue Velvet had this very beautiful opening, one of the most original openings in the history of film. And he shows this very quaint, very quiet suburban life, a lot of happy faces, kind of boring. But then some tragedy happens, and it exposes this very dark underbelly of the world. It's very frightening, one of the most dark and twisted and emotionally damaging films ever made. And this one is very similar. It's one thing that they have in common. But with Blue Velvet, the contrast with Mulholland Drive is that almost the entire film is beautiful. You're in the very sunny California, and you have all these hopes and dreams, and the whole film seems like a dream. But the opening is so surreal, and I've never seen anything like it. And it sets the tone for the whole film. You know this is a David Lynch film, and there's going to be a mystery of some sort. And something very weird, but in a good way, happening. I was mesmerized. Perhaps it was just the goosebumps of watching this great film over again for the first time in some years. I want to get right out of the way that Betty and Diane, as played by Naomi Watts, she gives one of the greatest performances of all time. A very underrated performance. A perfect performance. And there are not a lot of perfect performances. Forget a moment that she's an actress. Not that an actress cannot have some of the best performances. In fact, I think actresses are better actors than men. I'm not trying to gain points with women. But they're supposed to be a lot better with emotions. And the kind of emotions that we just see on the face. There are a lot of scenes where David Lynch doesn't use any words for what's going on with Betty or Diane and some of the other characters. But Naomi Watts plays Betty as the most innocent and nice character we've ever seen. The sweetest character we've ever seen in a movie, probably. And then she plays Diane, and we still sympathize with Diane because we've seen what she's gone through as Betty, if that's even the same person. And we see that she's heartbroken and she's on drugs, and all of her dreams have been shattered. And so we understand why she does what she does, why she wants to kill someone, because she's felt betrayed. And her suicide is one of the saddest things I've ever seen. It's one of the saddest deaths in film history, but it's a very powerful death, and it's a great ending. But Naomi Watts' performance is the best in the film, and there are some other great performances. Justin Theroux's is a key performance. He's probably the only character that seems to be like a normal person in the film. His is great, and that's a key performance. Naomi Watts' performance is as good as Robert De Niro in Taxi Driver, where he completely disappeared into a role. And it's his most unique and special performance on film. An all-time great performance, and as good as the early Marlon Brando on something like On the Waterfront. Her performance is just one of the best I've ever seen. Perfect. She really drives the film. Laura Elena Harenas also, she gives a great performance. One of the surprise performances comes from a real-life singer, and probably the most magical, and if there is an iconic moment in this film, it is the Silencio Club Silencio sequence, where no I banda, there is no band, but yet we hear a band. It's genius from David Lynch, perhaps his most surreal moment in any of his films, and it's genius, pure genius. He captivates the characters, and we believe that they're actually being captivated. And the audience, when Rebecca Del Rio comes on to sing a real live performance, a real rendition of the Spanish language version that she did of Roy Orbison's Crying. Roy Orbison makes a few appearances in David Lynch's films. It's a devastating performance, so emotional, more than acting. It was an authentic performance, and it makes you cry as she's singing Crying. It's such a powerful performance. I don't think it's there for anything more than just it's a magical moment. Perhaps completely unexpected. I think David Lynch called it a happy accident, both meeting Rebecca Del Rio and her performance. If there is any analysis to be made from this scene, I think it's the unraveling of Diane or Betty's mind, and I don't know. It is the most surreal moment in the whole film. It's incredible. The other moment I think is purely magical, and I think it's one of the best scenes ever edited, acted and directed, everything, but specifically the editing. When Betty goes to see the recasting, the actual recasting of Adam's film, and you have to watch the whole movie to understand how powerful this scene is and why it's so heartbreaking and so good. Betty walks in, and for some reason it's purely movie magic, and not that I'm saying that sarcastically, it's not contrived. For some reason, sometimes you just have a sixth sense, and Adam turns his head and he locks eyes with Betty, and it's one of the greatest slow zooms and the most practical use of it I've ever seen, where the camera zooms in on her face and she's blushing and she's embarrassed and she doesn't know what to do. And it's the most convincing love at first sight scene I've ever seen in the film, in film history. Probably the only truly convincing love at first sight. Forget all those other romance films. This is one of the best love films ever made. You could call it a mystery, a horror film. It's truly a love story. Not just with the City of Dreams, and that sort of mentality. But truly a love story. And it's heartbreaking because we know Adam would love to cast Betty in the part, but he's being forced to cast another actress. It's like losing your soul when a director cannot cast his film or make the adjustments that he wants to. It's no longer his film. Those are some of the most heartbreaking words ever spoken to a character in a film. Then you have Camilla Rhodes come on, the infamous Camilla Rhodes, and she's very sexy, and she's played by a very sexy actress. Now, the editing here is the masterpiece, I think, of the scene. The first shot that we have as the performance starts, Camilla Rhodes looks kind of cross-eyed at Adam, as if, I don't really have to try for this performance because I already know that I have the part. And then Adam, right before that, notice how he takes a long time to put on his headphones. That's a very deliberate shot choice. That's not just that they forgot to cut to the next scene, He does not want to hear a second of this performance. He doesn't want anything to do with it, but he has to. And so it's amazing. And then all the other subsequent edits, you see that Camilla grows with power, and now she's loving the spotlight. And her performance actually enraptures everyone. It's a testament to the power of David Lynch's directing and the sensuality, I think, of the actress. And even though we don't want to like her, we do. And then the whole scene breaks up, and it's still heartbreaking, as it was at the beginning. It's one of my favorite scenes of all time. One of the best in all departments. There are a lot of other moments in the film. One of the biggest plot twists I've ever seen is when Rita and Betty, they come into bed together, and I suppose there are very subtle hints that there's something more than friendship going on, more than just Nancy Drew trying to solve a mystery. Very, very childlike, very innocent. They come into bed together, they take their clothes off, and they start kissing and touching, and it's very sensual. So much more sensual than any sort of pornography. This is the greatest lesbian love scene of all time in a film. And as a man, I very much enjoyed it. And I did not see it coming, but I actually had no problem with it. I wasn't disturbed or anything. I was a very heterosexual man. It was very enjoyable. And it's one of the greatest love scenes just in general that I've ever seen. And so it's heartbreaking when Betty or Diane and Rita and Camilla, they're falling out. That Diane has been betrayed, and we understand why things happen. But her death scene is one of the most heartbreaking things I've ever seen in a film, where all of her dreams have been shattered, and she's been heartbroken, she's been betrayed, and she shoots herself in the head, and that's the end of the film. It's very sad, deeply sad and disturbing. And another disturbing thing, if you consider the fact that maybe the blue box is really about the secret, the death of Camilla, and therefore the death of Betty. She cannot live with herself. And then you think about the monster behind the diner, who's just a bum from the gutter, from the dumpster, and you think that that's where Camilla, she was just thrown away. It's very dark and very frightening and very much more disturbing. I look at that disturbing creature, and it actually haunts me more than ever. It was very scary the first time I saw the film, and then not so much, but now I'm starting to get the creeps thinking about that again. But this film is not one to be analyzed. It's so much more about the emotions and how it makes you feel, and it gets under my skin. It will get under your skin too. It's one of the most emotional movies I've ever seen. I think it's a masterpiece for that reason. And it's going to be a long time before someone is able to come along and make something like this film. And one last thought. I think that the elderly couple is utterly terrifying. And really the whole film is about Naomi Watts, who I know I'm gushing about, but Naomi Watts is really about her story and how she came to Hollywood. And she was naive, and she had a little bit opposite to Betty. She had a number of years of rejection and not having the limelight. And it was just a chance meeting with David Lynch that she was cast in this part, and it's one of the best casting choices of all time, and just very good luck for her. And it's really the story of Naomi Watts and her dreams, but with a little bit of horror and a love story in the mix. So that's really what you should take out of Mulholland Drive, I think, if you are a normal human being. And David Lynch films aren't so bad, because I think he gets a bad rap for being a little bit dark and twisted and very weird, but I think Mulholland Drive is his most personal film and his warmest film, his most human film, and it's one of the best films ever made.